we can start. Dear all, I would like actually to welcome you in this second in a row webinar. It is, my name is Nikos Panagiotou. I'm an associate professor at Aristotle University of Thessaloniki and director of Digital Communication Network Southeast Europe Hub. Thank you for being here today with us. It is this actually webinar series, it is organized from the DCN Southeast Europe Hub, which is headquartered in Thessaloniki, Greece. The webinar is arranged jointly by our hub, DCN and World Learning, and the Digital Communication Network, which is actually a coalition of digital influencers with the aim to improve the information space, and is supported by the US Department of State Office of Citizens Exchanges, whom we all thank. Today, we will actually discuss the issue regarding how democracies can and should correspond in pandemics. And Franak Viacorka will take it from here, as he will be actually the moderator of this discussion. Franak? You should unmute yourself, Franak. We cannot hear you.
Yes, hi, I just started recording. So we are streaming this event to the YouTube and to the Facebook. You will be able to watch this video afterwards. So you can always ask questions in the chat section. Don't worry to ask questions to to our speakers. And if you want to speak out, you can raise your hand. There is a special button there. So first we will have short introduction presentations by each speaker. Later we will have a short round of discussion or debate, and then we can take your questions. So the whole event will take about 1 hour, and we will be very happy if you can fill out the form after event will end. So I think I want to highlight myself. Yeah, like this. Yes, hi. So first of all, I'd like to invite Christos. Christos, actually about the poll. Nikos, I think we forgot about the poll. Do you also see my background jumping?
Yes, I can see the your background jumping, but we can overcome that. I mean, it's
okay,
part of the coronavirus issue.
We have questions for all of you, our participants, our attendees. So I will launch the poll. So the first question, Nikos, do you want to explain? So who can fight
pandemics better? Democracies, autocracies, both, or none of the above? Because there were a lot of discussion in mass media and around who is better to fight, I mean, coronavirus. There were mentions about China, or there are issues about how we, the Western world, are trying to fight it, etc. Then the second question is, did you came across or seen fake news regarding COVID-19? It's again an issue that it is at the center of this discussion, of this panel, but also at the center of discussion that takes place all around the world. And the third one, it is, are you in favor of giving up some of our liberties in order to fight pandemics? So the answer is yes, yes for a limited time, or no. All of these are part of the discussion and the questions that we will actually highlight and bring to our attention with this webinar.
So we see that democracies are winning in the first question, which is actually a very interesting question. I think we can discuss it today with our distinguished speakers, because sometimes when China reported the great results in fighting COVID, I thought for a moment that perhaps dictatorships or authoritarian regimes can deal with this better. But after Brazilian, Belarus, and Turkmen strategy came, I realized that perhaps democracies are not almighty, not so powerful, but at least in democracies you have trust and you have transparency between citizens and governments. In the second question, we have 100% answers yes. Did you came across or seen fake news? yes. And the third question, are you in favor of giving up some of our liberties to fight pandemic? So here we see, oh, here the dog. And on the third question, we see 69% answering yes for a limited time. It means that 67% of our attendees agree to give up their liberties, freedoms, and rights to let government or societies to fight pandemics. That's pretty interesting, Nikos, right?
It is pretty interesting because regarding the first question, just want to remind all of us the emphasis that has been given on how China, and we have seen all across media that China built up really quick a hospital, etc. But we tend to forget where actually the incident came from and why it have taken place. The second one is that we all came across with fake news because we are in a time of crisis, but the most important thing is about, are we willing to give up some of our liberties? Yes, for a limited time, and to what extent, and till when? I think it should be at another interesting aspect of this discussion.
And I think it's a right moment actually to begin our conversation. So I'd like to invite here Dr. Christos Frangonikolopoulos from Aristotle University, our big friend of DCN, Southeast Europe Hub, and Digital Communication Network, and the person who was always very supportive to all the efforts to fight disinformation and to empower journalism worldwide. So, Dr. Frangonikolopoulos, it's your time. Please, welcome.
Yes, it's Christos with an I, and Fra, it's F-H-R-A-N. Okay. So, Nikos, will you be showing the PowerPoint?
Yes, exactly.
So I can, okay, listen, the crisis we are going through with the coronavirus, indicates that, at the beginning of the 21st century, we are suffering from many global problems. But at the same time, we are also suffering from a global democratic deficit. And this deficit is not only generated by the deepening of the challenges that we are facing, It is also, if you wish, and there are four reasons that explain. This is, there seems to be an underperformance of the global mechanisms for the regulation of crises. So you can say that the institutional infrastructure of global governance, which includes, of course, states, international organizations, and NGOs, is proven inadequate to deal with issues like that, because you have too many bodies, there is loose coordination between them, and the responses, it seems, are better suited to the short-term electoral considerations of leaders rather than the requirements of the interdependent world. Another factor which explains today's condition is that we are living in a trust paradox. In other words, most societal institutions, governments, businesses, NGOs, and the media, according to the very recent 2020 Edelman Trust Barometer, and this is their 20th Trust Barometer, they've been doing this for 20 years, tells us that no institution is trusted, is to be trusted. Variations do exist, country by country. However, the average trust that the government and the media enjoy is just below 50%. Another reason that perhaps explains today's condition is that, this postmodernism, relativism trend that began after the end of the Cold War has shaken people's faith, if you wish, in objective facts. So we have arrived at a condition where alternative facts are legitimized. The dramatic transformations, that we have also in the structure and economy of information, which is also driven by, communication technologies, digital tools, information overload, but combined with growing discontent among the citizens, with the status quo, has one very significant consequence. There is no agreement on the truth. And as a result, we are all talking about post-truth. But, there is no truth. You might say that there are many truths, and each side, each truth mobilizes, political, economic, or social struggles to hegemonize reality and provide different regimes of truth. Mainstream politicians, the so-called not populists, if you wish, they attacked and delegitimize populists of the right and the left by connecting information and irrationality, with the voters and their media. Populists, on the other hand, want to delegitimize critical thinking, critical journalism. They label politicians and journalists as proponents of fake news, and seek to deconstruct, if you wish, the public role that critical thinking and critical journalism has. Now, this has another consequence, that what may be distinct, if you wish, about our time is not the presence of the unreal over the real, but the fragmentation of the unreal from the large-scale political, economic, and social narratives of the past to various small-scale narratives that are in battle with each other. So we live in societies where, the social media have become spaces where different narratives meet, where distinctions between information theory and story become easily blurred. So if you wish, you might say that the Oxford definition of post-truth, as it was offered in 2016, as it defined post-truth as circumstances in which objective facts are less influential in shaping public opinion than appeals to personal opinion. I would say rather that post-truth are spaces in which public opinion itself divorces into a variety of narratives, voices, sounds, noises, and they are all competing for attention. And this reality today, is completely unfit to address the challenges of today's world. Problems like climate change, migration, war, poverty, pandemics, because all these challenges are reduced to arenas of mere opinion and different narratives and counter-narratives. And, and in an environment of media fragmentations, echo chambers and so on, it is not possible to communicate, to discuss and engage with others in a critical way. It is not that truth, if you wish, is disregarded, but truth is associated with emotions, fear, intimidation, and critical, if you wish, scrutiny gives way to panic and mutual demonization. So in these circumstances, it's not possible to have reasonable debate. Everybody is the enemy. We only discuss and argue with people that are not enemies. We don't even discuss with enemies. So we'll come back to this in the conclusion. So what do we need to do? I think that politicians, international organizations, NGOs, universities, and the media need to formulate a very broad thematic agenda that does not leave out any of the global issues. We need to start thinking of how we can contribute to the delivery of global public goods, such as peace, security, respect for human rights, so on, sustainable development. And this requires that an understanding, that on part of the governments, international organizations and NGOs and the media, that the emphasis they place on their own image and status, rather than genuine dialogue is a problem. It's a mistake. So we have to show a readiness to listen to change, to listen and change, to engage with the publics. And don't tell me that is not possible today. International politics today is not just about geopolitics. We live in a global, interdependent, interconnected world. The state is not the only power, the only actor. There are already other actors. We talk about social power, which means social power and global governance, which means a sphere in which governments bargain and discuss with other governments in international organizations or with other actors, non-state actors, and so on. So we need to talk to publics. Now, how do we do that? And here I think very valuable is the concept of noosphere. This was a concept that was introduced by Ronfeld and Arkila more than a decade ago. And it's very helpful. They draw from the ancient Greek word nous. I'm not an ancient history fanatic, but I think this is a very good concept, very good term to have in mind. So they draw from the word nous, and as we know, nous is mind, and that points to the public sphere, the sphere of knowledge, ideas, and discourse. So for them, it means global realm of mind, where information and power are increasingly intertwined, and that can redefine, if you wish, the contours of power, security, strategy, and diplomacy in the information age. The noosphere becomes, a sphere of ideas, values, norms, and arguments within which both state and non-states can be, and the media can be engaged. And people cease being only power maximizing, but also adopt power sharing aspects and logics. And these deliberations, may lead to new politic, which does not want to substitute real politics, classical politics, but no politic, is not worrying about whose story is right, which story wins. It's about factfulness, as Roslin has defined factfulness. He says that we need to engage in the stress-reducing habit of only carrying, in other words, supporting opinions for which you have strong supporting facts. And this he calls a stress-reducing habit. It's a fact, because people don't look for facts, don't read too much today. So the need is to recognize and avoid the most common ways information gets, misinterpreted. We don't see reality as it is. There is too much information for us to process, and this might lead to an overall, stressful, over-dramatic impression of the world. So, as a tendency, as a result, we have the tendency to divide the world into two distinct and very conflicting groups, us, them. We give attention more to the good, to the bad than to the good. We pay attention to frightening things, and we often also get things out of proportion. So, having said all this, and because I am, if you wish, an international relations, global politics professor, I think, and I would suggest that governments, IOs, international organizations, NGOs, and the media should engage in what I and my fellow from England, Proedru, have defined as strategic discursive diplomacy, public diplomacy. As you know, public diplomacy is about promoting the culture you know, the history, the seas, the mountains of other countries and languages and so on. But we should change that. And in that sense, strategic means that more focus in the relations between states should be given on the threats of the globe today that are common to all of us. And discursive in this sense means, you know, to discuss how we can contribute to the delivery of public goods. And strategic discursive diplomacy in this sense means that we focus on major challenging global issues today and engage our publics, you know, in an open debate with the aim to communicate standpoints, but also to listen.
Can we take questions?
I'm finishing. Yes, I'm finishing, and to provide counter arguments. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
1 minute, 1 or 2 minutes. Okay. So if we do that, we will also have accountability, transparency, and legitimacy. I don't know if Nikos is showing you the PowerPoint. Are you?
Yes, yes, I do. Yes.
Are the others seeing the PowerPoint? But if you are seeing the PowerPoint, you know, I have 3 ways there. I think we can create space for alternative theorizations to mainstream paradigms, or function in the direction of existing policies, you know, making them more efficient, criticize current policies, and so on. So what is clear is that we require a more profound approach, you know, one that engineers a dialogue with people of the world, you know. Dialogue may or may not lead to changed policy positions or changed opinions about policy decisions, but however, if we do develop a willingness to listen and to show respect for thoughtful alternative voices, this might reduce, you know, ameliorate these problems, or at least, if you wish, facilitate an understanding of why we have these problems and what we can do about that. And in conclusion, you know, truth can never be fully known, of course, and truth will always be contested. Politics without some measure of, however, politics without some measure of truth is sophistry, as they used to say in ancient Greece, you know. You may use clever but false arguments, you know, but if you do that, you deceive intentions. So you need to produce plural search for truth today, rather than mere opinion.
Thank you,
You know,
Dr.
and that might be
thank you.
the common good. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was Dr. Christos Frangonikolopoulos from Aristotle University. And to remind everyone who joined us later that today we discuss how democracies can cope with the pandemic, develop counter-narratives to disinformation. So today we have 3 distinguished speakers, but you are more than welcome to ask questions, to participate in the discussion. So there is one comment in the comment section from Vasilis Nikos. So his question is, and perhaps this question will go to Marie Bohner, who is our next speaker. The question is whether there is a margin for legitimate fake news, meaning whether the governments and institutions could use fake news to some extent to convince indisciplined people to comply with the measures, such as a more dramatized presentation of the reality, so that people realize their risks and their responsibility. So that's the same question about this: where is the border between liberties and public health and public security? So, and at this point, I'd like to give a word to Marie Bohner. Marie Bohner is project manager for First Draft from the US, correct? From the United States, you are there, right?
No, I'm in France. I'm in Strasbourg, but I'm part of the London team of First Draft.
Oh, that's so great. So please, Marie Bohner, floor is yours, and perhaps you can begin with answering this question.
Actually, I will tackle that issue in the presentation. So if that's fine for you, I will go through the presentation and answer it when it comes, so that it makes sense in the in the flow of the presentation. So I will share my screen now so that you can access the presentation. Do you see it?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So, hello to you all, and many thanks, Nikos and Franak, for this invitation to join this webinar. I'm going to focus more on the journalist perspective, the media perspective, because that's what we do at First Draft mainly. So I'm less on the democratic side and more on what can we do as journalists. So as I'm sure you've all experienced by now, coronavirus is an incredibly tough story to cover. Public health issues in general are already challenging to report on for a variety of reasons, but especially so when there's still so much uncertainty around the spread of the virus itself, the contagiousness, and the possible treatment. So it's a complex task. Newsrooms have to provide the public with accurate, up-to-date, easy to understand information in an environment where the developments are coming in thick and fast. While doing that, we also have to think about how we can avoid amplifying misinformation around the virus and how we can avoid stoking public fear and panic. This is part of the responsibility that journalists in democracies have in a time like this. Find a balance between free speech and possibilities to criticize the measures taken by governments, but also responsible and ethical reporting and access to accurate and verified information without creating more fear and panic. So knowing what information readers are looking for, as Christos just said, like engaging with people, listening to them, knowing what they are looking for, and knowing how to answer it without amplifying misinformation. How can we balance all those things? First Draft works on monitoring online information disorder, but also on supporting journalists on areas where newsrooms can actually make a difference with the choices they are doing on headlines, photos, but also data voids. So this is what I propose to share with you today. So let me start by introducing myself. So I'm Marie Bohner, I'm project manager, as Franak said. I have worked on collaborative journalism projects before, especially during the presidential election in France in 2017, and more recently on other elections. First Draft, for the ones who do not know about us, is a non-profit organization born in 2015 as an informal global network of media organizations, universities, and tech platforms. So First Draft is nowadays an organization with offices in London, New York, and Sydney, which trains journalists and supports them around information disorder challenges. First Draft has created a resource hub, which you have the link on that slide, with essential and practical guides to investigate the social web and the information disorder, but also webinars in various languages and a global database of debunks and fact checks around coronavirus, which might be useful for you, which is searchable by keywords. If you want to know more about any of this, do not hesitate to get in touch with me. First Draft is also releasing today an online course for journalists on COVID-19, coronavirus. So you're the very first ones to be informed about it, and do not hesitate to visit our page about that. So we are all very conscious of the difficulty to cover a topic like coronavirus as a journalist today. Verified information about the spread of the virus at global level, possible treatments, death tolls, and even so number of contaminated people, even measures taken to fight the virus in the various countries, all these informations are changing continuously. There is thus a large place left for data voids, as we qualify them, spaces with lots of questions from the audience and few reliable answers. We have started a monitoring and collaborative information sharing initiative since 2 weeks at First Draft. We are monitoring online conversations around coronavirus in the USA, but also in the UK, Ireland, France, and Francophone areas, India, and soon to be looking at Brazil. We are hoping to be able to monitor more countries in the upcoming weeks. So maybe if you're interested, again, don't hesitate to get in touch with me. By doing this monitoring, here are some of the mis and disinformation trends we are seeing repeatedly in various countries, which are all used to undermine the public institutions, authorities, so the democracy, and the way they are dealing with the pandemic. So as you can see, the narratives that we are seeing online are blaming migrants or other segments of the population for the outbreak of coronavirus. So we see a lot of anti-Chinese, anti-Muslim, anti-migrant narratives. We also see a lot of disinformation and misinformation blaming governments for the management of the crisis, especially in relations to the opening of borders. So it could be national governments, but also the EU in itself. We saw a lot of speculation in closed messaging apps like WhatsApp, for example, on containment measures, a state of emergency, control by police or army. I think you probably all received this kind of text. Yeah, I have a brother of a friend who works with the government and told me that tomorrow there will be a curfew at 6 p.m. and that nobody can come out, or some things like that are going viral all around the world. And conspiracy theories, for example, about man-made virus as a biological weapon. We also have to face the fact that some data voids may be created by the lack of information about the virus itself and the way it's evolving. Another one is also the data void created by the communication of public authorities themselves. If we take the example of France, for example, as in this slide, the communication about the protective impact of wearing a mask has created a lot of confusion, but also the question of death tolls has created confusion too, because for a long time, France, and they have been explaining that they were doing that, but they have been counting as the death toll of coronavirus only the people dying in hospitals and not the ones dying in elderly homes. So they are now counting the ones dying in elderly homes too, which makes the numbers rise significantly. So the fact that the governments themselves are changing the way they are counting the death, for example, is also leaving some room for speculation about how various governments are manipulating figures concerning the pandemic. We also see the fact that governments, democratic or not, are also putting in place some specific measures, such as states of emergency or even full powers to the prime ministers, as was done in Hungary, which can jeopardize the question of freedom of speech and freedom of press. Hungary is an extreme example of this, but it has to be underlined that many countries, including a lot of European countries, are actually looking at how to use cell phone data, especially geolocation features of cell phone data, to have a better analysis or control of their citizens' movement. Laws are also passed to treat the spread of mis and disinformation with all kinds of punishments, from fines to jail time sentences. These types of laws are often opposed by freedom of speech advocates. So this is to get back to the question that was raised before. There is a lot of conflict about that, and also of possible I never know how to pronounce that word, KVADs. So, and the meme that you can see is a meme that is going going viral in Australia at the moment. So this is really all over the world. Countering disinformation narratives can thus be made by offering even better, in our view, in first of view, offering even better, more responsible, useful, and ethical journalism, because allowing readers to feel that they can take control back, or that they can take action in a way or another, rather than contributing to panic and fear mongering, is what can best contribute to the stability in these very uncertain times. With headlines and images, the trick here is to choose them as journalists as if they were all that your audience is going to see. Because to be honest with you, this is often going to be the case. Many of your readers are going to scroll very quickly in social media, and all they are going to see about it is the headline or the image. The message that you send as a journalist in these few seconds really matters. So the question is, what impression do you want your headlines to leave on your readers? Our big advice here is to avoid using sensationalist and emotional language like deadly, killer, catastrophic, no end in sight, or out of control, for example. Emotional content might draw more clicks, but ask what good that ultimately does on the readers. People are already panicked. Most communities know that the new coronavirus is a big deal. Public health officials and epidemiologists agree that what we need people to do right now is to remain calm and take preventative measures that we know work. The media has a responsibility here to avoid using sensationalist headlines and feeding into panic. If we're seeing some specific rumors over and over again, picking up on big numbers and shares and like on social media, gaining tractions on platforms and on different online communities, it could be beneficial for us to debunk this information for our readers. But when we are debunking misinformation, avoiding using judgmental or mockery in the wording we are using is also very essential, because using words like bizarre or irrational or things like that might actually alienate your readers and cause a backfire effect on it. So anxiety and fear are very normal facts at the moment in these uncertain times. So it's really important as journalists to employ the empathy that you have. It's the same thing for photographies. If you are using photographies like this of empty shelves or of empty spaces, empty squares in cities, or if you're using photographies with only people who have an Asian face with a mask, when you're not even talking about the outbreak in Asia or any contagion about Asia, that is fueling stereotypes, but also fueling more fear and more panic potentially. So research has shown that when you are sending a message that says, do not do this behavior, you should not show pictures of the same behavior that you are trying to discourage, because those pictures actually have the opposite effect than what you're saying. And people think like, oh, if I see that, and if people are doing that, it's fine if I do it also. And this is, yeah, contributing to the general panic. Rather than, it's good to give readers a sense of control, as I was saying before, and provide them with concrete steps that they can take. For example, what can you do right now about coronavirus, or practical tips for coronavirus prevention? These are all tips that you can share as a journalist, and that give hope and manage to keep people calm longer. If you think that people in your community, and that comes back to the fact that you should listen to your community of readers, if you think that people of your community actually do not think that coronavirus is such a big deal and continue to, I don't know, go out, have parties, things like that, then you might think as a journalist, it's your point to make sure that people understand this is serious. But then you can say it's serious rather than saying killer virus or no end in sight and fueling more panic. So instead of pictures that cause alarm or xenophobia, think about positive image that you can use, like in this picture, for example. This is the magazine Self in the US, which has been creating an image stock for positive images about vaccines. So I think we are probably lacking the same kind of positive images possibly about coronavirus, about people actually coping with coronavirus, about doctors that are doing their job, about pictures that could be reassuring in a way or another. Another practical tip to consider as a journalist when you're talking about rumors that you are seeing online is the fact that sometimes if you use the keywords of the rumors in your headlines, it's amplifying the rumor itself. So we at First Draft think that you should tailor your headlines depending on the kind of platform it's going to be shared on. Because there's a difference between the headlines readers stumble on and the headlines that readers find through searches. So readers that are likely to stumble on headlines in algorithmic feeds like Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, for these headlines, it's important for newsrooms to be careful not to repeat coronavirus rumors in the headline text. Even including keywords of the rumors can be problematic. But for the search headlines, amplification is amplification is less of a concern. If a reader is searching for a rumor, typing, for example, can I prevent coronavirus by putting hairdryer in my mouth? For example, they clearly already heard about the rumor before they type it. So the amplification problem is not there, but the important thing for the journalist to reach these readers is to reach them where they are and where they are searching before the misinformation does. So for titles on Google and YouTube and Bing, we do recommend that you use the keywords of the rumors in your headlines.
Thank you, Maria. Can we take a few questions, or you just like
I just have like 2 more things to say and then I'm done. So here's a list of tips that we are sharing to report more responsibly on coronavirus. And here are the resources that I told to you about before, the course online, the webinars, and the tips for reporting. We can maybe share the links with Nikos and Franak, which will share them with you afterwards. And that's all for me. So,
Marie, that's awesome. That's spectacular. Thank you so much for your presentation. So I will remind our attendees, and now we have 120 people watching only on Zoom and also people on YouTube. Marie Bohner works for First Draft. She's based in Strasbourg, and First Draft is UK organization, correct?
First Draft is based, the headquarters are in London, but we also have an office in New York and another one in Sydney.
And it will be very great if you can share with our attendees the slides. I think there is a big interest to this. Can I ask this question from Anti Balio? Is it possible to verify the reports coming from the authoritarian regimes at a moment of crisis? So I think the question is more about how fast can we be when checking disinformation and fakes produced by state actors or near state actors?
I guess that's a question for me.
Yes,
yeah,
yes, it's good for you.
Can you take it?
Well, I'm not sure I can have all the answers to that, but I think that the process of verification is the same as for every verification that you should do online on every information. There are lots of, it depends on the information that you're verifying, but you can compare the information that you're getting to other official sources. You can also, if you have the time, do a much more in-depth investigation to see if the information that is shared is actually comparable to things that have been shared before, or if you can share it with open source data, for example, as the Bellingcat team is doing very much on lots of authoritarian regimes. But I think that it really depends. I don't think it's possible to check everything in real time before doing some thorough investigation. But then, I think it's also better not to trust figures that are given by any kind of government blindly. But at the same time, don't want to start doubting everything. So it's good to have also some sources you can go for, even if it's WHO for a while.
And let's take another one more question by Olga, because Olga wanted to ask you, Marie. Olga Olga, are you ready? Are you with us here?
Hello, Franak, but what I should be ready for if I have already
Question to Marie Bohner.
But it was a question, not the one with the link from the Radio Freedom. You mean the one about the?
So it's up to you. It's up to you. What do you want to ask?
But actually, I wouldn't like to take this chance to get the question regarding spreading all of the resources and maximizing the audiences. Because I have written it, I had a question to everyone starting from the poll. And this was the question that I sent a small link. This has been a publication, which is also a video report from Radio Liberty, Radio Free Europe, about just an event which hasn't been on, let's say, international news. It has been only on local news. And I wanted to raise a question of how we could have democratic procedures and how we could meet democracy challenges as, let's say, community and citizens if we observe changes which have taken place as described in this report. So first of all, my suggestion would be if locally there is a complete turn away from democratic to the other extent taking place, that we need to make this issue really international. And then perhaps we could consider it as an international community, because I think that like Hungary, it is not disadvantaged because everyone sees what is happening there as it is in the EU. But some of the Central Eastern European countries could just have very silenced turns in their dynamics of their democracies, and nothing is going to happen. So, and this actually addresses all of our webinar and not just this session.
Thank you, Olga, so much. I think that's a good transition to Nikos, because Nikos can take both this question and other questions from our chat. Olga, thank you so much for being so active in the chat and in general for attending all the Hubs events. That's very nice. Nikos, okay. I think you can try to take Olga's question, but also to move to your presentation. But I'm sure I know you're going to cover it.
No, I think that my presentation will actually combine what Christos and Marie have discussed before. And now I'm sharing my screen in order to give you an overview of where we are and respond to the second question that have been actually raised from the participants as well. What can we do in order to cope with the pandemic and the information that we receive? I will base my presentation on the responses that we have received on a major survey that we have run in Greece with 1,300 participants, together with Professor Frangonikolopoulos and the PhD candidates Ilias Nikesis, Anthi Balio, and Spiridoula Markou. So what we have seen is that during this time of pandemic crisis, we have seen an increased use of mass media in comparison with what we have seen before. Almost 55% spend 2 hours and more per day in order to be informed. Regarding the question of how much what kind of media they trust regarding COVID-19 information, what we can see it is that 23% is being actually, they trust the TV, and then 16 the newspapers, and then 19 the social media, but 37% are really trust the online sources like e-newspapers, etc. So what we have seen, another important element, it is that in the question, in which extent do you use scientific sources to get information regarding the coronavirus crisis, we got a result that 77% are looking for scientific sources, in order to be informed of the coronavirus. Let's keep this element because it will help us actually underline and present how we can tackle, how democracies can respond to this kind of situation. So regarding the trust in media, regarding in correlation with media avoidance, most of them that they avoid media is because they don't trust them, while the ones that they are consistently informed, they trust much more the media, which we have seen an increase in this element during the crisis. In the question, have you in any way felt that you have been affected by news that turn out to be false or fake? We get the same results, that the majority of the people that we have asked have seen, as it results from our poll that we have conducted now with our participants. They argue that they have seen fake news. The problem becomes higher in the age groups of 16-18, so we should keep this element. The problem among the age group 19 to 54 is 52 to 55% they have seen fake news, while 33 to 35% they responded negatively. From the age group of 55 to 64, 56% again answered yes, while the ones that they are over 65 years, they argue that 75% have seen fake news, and in a way they have been influenced by the information that they got. I will compare these results with a global survey from Edelman, where 74% argue that they have seen, or they have, it came to their attention a lot of fake news, while 45% says that they need to find reliable and trustworthy information, as Marie have said, while 85% needs to hear more from scientists and less from politicians, as actually Christos Frangonikolopoulos have argued, and also what it results from our research, from our survey that we have conducted in Greece. Another element that we have asked them is regarding the impact of public campaigns and influencers during the pandemic crisis. We have seen that 89% agree that the public communication campaigns raised the awareness regarding the coronavirus crisis, while 71% actually have they endorsed what the influencers have done in order to raise awareness regarding the issue. So how to and why, what we can do? So we have to have in mind that the open nature of democratic societies may actually leave our populations vulnerable to influence operation in order that try to undermine the credibility of the democratic process. But while the issue has been mainly approached from a medical perspective, what we mainly miss is that it is equally a highly political one. Why? Because the lack of transparency had led us where we are. This is why democracies are better than autocracies in fighting this kind of pandemics. We should never forget that what led us to this kind of in this situation, it is the lack of transparency, the lack of raising awareness that what we have here is a really serious issue that should have been done from the Chinese authorities in the outbreak of the pandemic, that it would have led us in a better position to fight this pandemic. This is why the issue is a highly political one. It's not only a health issue, because in democratic societies, we can actually open up a space and be transparent, discuss about the issue, as Bill Gates have done through TEDx and through various forms, that he was continuously warning us about the risk of living in a globalized world. We should take this into account. So democracies can really fight better than autocracies, because in democracies, we should have never let this kind of incident get out of our countries in order to infect the rest of the world. So regarding on what we have found, it is that public health fundamentally depends on public trust. This is another element that it constitutes our democracy. Democracies, our democratic systems lies upon trust. Public health lies on public trust. It's not about imposing the other, it's just about creating a consensus about it. So more lives could be saved if nations embraced democratic norms, especially of transparency and collaboration, in order to be able to tackle the issue, as we have seen that is happening in the European Union, as it happens in the States, among New York, etc. So this kind of collaboration we need, and this kind of collaboration is what we find in democratic institutions. Saying that, I will just pass the floor to the public, to the participants, I'm sorry, in order to discuss actually and to take up some questions and open up the floor for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Nikos. So we have many questions. So I'll try perhaps to take the last one. So from Styliani Papasarafiano, are there any surveys currently underway to determine whether news reports, news bulletins are affecting the spread of moral panic stemming from the COVID crisis? Nikos, I think that's a question to you.
Yes, according to our survey, we have seen that people tend to news avoidance in order to not to be stressed from what they read and what they hear or what they watch. So what it is equally important of what actually Marie have underlined, not among the things that that we should have in mind when reporting about the coronavirus is how to address this kind of issue of stress and panic. It should be included in our reports, and this is what Christos actually underlined, that good news should be news as well, not only the negative aspect.
So another, yes, please, yes, Marie.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that because there was a question just before about the wrong power images and the empty supermarkets. Of course, they have been some panic buying. We have seen that in several countries where suddenly there was a shortage of pasta and toilet paper, for example. Actually in the UK, but for example, or in France. But at the same time, showing completely empty shelves like that actually is just going to get more people to rush to the supermarket and try to buy things, even if the image itself is actually from a stock of image that probably has been done like 10 years before and has nothing to do with the actual situation. So the question is not to avoid bad news or situations that are happening, but it's just not to report only about that all the time and generate more panic about that all the time. It doesn't mean that you have to avoid it completely, of course.
Thank you, Marie. Christos, do you want to say?
Yes. I think it's deeper, it's very deep. First of all, I would like to stress that if this had begun in the West, I am not sure to what extent and how they would be willing to share information with autocratic states. But we live in the West, right? And the West has been enjoying high levels of prosperity for the last 80 years, despite some setbacks due to the economic crisis of the last decade. So I would like to think that all of us, and I would not like to exclude myself, but all of us are spoiled brats. Okay? So even if you play or you do not play a picture or a reportage from a supermarket where people are panicking, it will not make a difference. We will all run to the supermarket despite what the media are saying. Because we are spoiled brats, we are afraid of tomorrow. We only like to live today. We are afraid to look forward, and because we're afraid to look forward, we are looking backwards, as we have seen in most countries of the West today. We understand our panic by running to the supermarkets, but at the same time, we doubt and we don't understand why refugees are leaving their countries, you know, and we are asking stupid questions like, why do they not stay home to work? Why do they need to stay home to fight, you know? So it is a contradictory world, and it shows something about, if you wish, the decadence of our world. Thirdly, I would like to stress, you know, that the problem today of information, and this is personal, of course, you know, is that most of us are lazy. We don't read newspapers. We don't read books. We prefer to listen to podcasts which are informative, of course, while we are doing work at home, you know. Or we want major news production outlets to mention how many minutes it's going to take to read a particular article. You know, this is the problem. You know, we have to read, we have to understand. You know, and after the pandemic, those who are not afraid of airplanes, like I am, or who are not afraid to visit other countries, they should also visit other countries. You know, it's very simple, and don't be afraid to talk and discuss with people that have different views from you. If they have, you know, it's better for you. Don't only speak with people that have the same views as you. You know, it's deeper. It's deeper, and we have seen it in the leaders we have decided that should govern us. In the United States, it's very deep, very deep.
Christos, thank you so much, Christos. I just wanted to keep in all this discussion flow because there is a question from Caitlin, and this is a question very related to what Christos mentioned as well. So, in the post-pandemic world, will societies become closer through solidarity, sharing mutual resources, or more isolated, closed, possibly increasing xenophobia, but also threatening globalization as we know it, in your opinion? So some of you already answered, but I want every speaker now to address this question. Will the pandemic make the world a better place? Will it help to build better democracies, more strong democracies, or opposite? So, Christos, you can start briefly, and then we can ask Maria and Nikos to share.
I'm sorry, I have this tendency to speak a lot. If it doesn't, we are in, and sorry for the word I'm going to say, we are in deep shit for the crisis to follow. Because the pandemic is small, very small problem in comparison to what is going to follow in the next 50 or 60 years from the movement of populations or climate change. And societies cannot close today. You know, we are not in the 1920s or in the 1930s. You know, we need to discuss things, and we need to realize that what we are facing today in Europe and in countries like Greece, you know, and this is why our liberties were curtailed, because of the fear that the public system, health system would fail. It's understandable. In Greece, we have been in an austerity program for the last 20 years. No investments were made in hospitals. No investments were made in doctors. The doctors we had left for other countries. So it's understandable that the government reacted in the way it did. And this is also a problem in the other European countries. Problems were put under the carpet until a major problem arose, you know, like the pandemic, and it shows how naked the West was in dealing with this issue.
Thank you, Christos. Nikos, do you want to address it too?
Yes, what I think is that the Western societies have something that is a major element in order to deal with this issue. The major element of this issue is deepening and strengthening democracies. Let all the voices to be heard. This means that that we have actually to put leverage on trust. One of the main issues that we have lost up until now is trust in our institutions. We have to rebuild this trust. The lack of trust doesn't mean that our democracies are not working. The lack of trust, it means that actually that our democracies are the ones that could equally deal with this kind of issues, and our democracies are the ones that actually could help in preventing through transparency and collaboration in these this kind of pandemics and crises. This is actually what most of the people feel when they respond, that they need accurate resources, they need reliable information, and what they need is to rebuild the trust in institutions. We have to gain that.
Thank
Marie?
you, Marie.
Yes, I agree with everything that has been said until now. I think that there was already a tendency in Europe in the past decade to self-isolate as nations more and more, and it's the same at every level of society. I also think that collaboration is key, that transparency is key. I agree with Nikos that we have to find a way to trust our public authorities again, although sometimes they are highly to be criticized of their own actions, and also to be held accountable. But that's why we have a democratic system that is actually based for that. I think that, yeah, collaboration is key. And I also agree that this crisis is just the beginning of the change of lots of paradigms. And I hope that we are going to seize the chance in this world changing to make it a better place without sounding too I don't know, naive.
Thank you, Marie. So let's take the last question for today, because already 1 hour 10 minutes, and we have video question from Ramzi Shahimi. Ramzi, can you tell who you are and from where do you watch this webinar?
Hello, everyone. I'm a professor at the University of Pristina, Journalism Department, Kosovo. So I really appreciate you for organizing this webinar. It was so interesting. I've been following the previous one and this one, and the discussion is great. And thank you for taking the effort of organizing it and bringing up the speakers together. This is great. And secondly, I was just like a lot of questions were popping up in my mind since we were discussing about how democracies can cope in this pandemic time. I was wondering, since the pandemic started, nobody was talking about the war in Syria. None of the media was reporting about the refugee floats around the world. So I was wondering, like, how can we get now to know information firsthand of how these people are dealing in these difficult times? Because we have a shelter where to go, we have a home to stay at home and to do our like daily routines, but how about like people who don't have any shelter and people who were like fighting? And nowadays, at least in Kosovo, we since the pandemic time started, and it's beginning of March when we kind of got into quarantine, I haven't heard any news of the fights in Syria or the refugees all over the world.
That's a very complex question, Ramsey. Thank you so much for asking this. I think that's a good topic for next webinars. But perhaps some of our speakers want to take.
I would like,
it's,
yes.
It's like unavoidable that important issues are hidden, are go into the shadow when things like pandemic happen to the world.
This is the problem of today, you know. I mean, and I'm going again to speak about the Western media. We tend to concentrate too much on issues, on news that are of strategic nature to us, very important. And all the other issues become forgotten issues, you know. And when the pandemic is over, they will again come to the top of the agenda, not all of them, but again, you know. And the question then that will replace, if the question that we have today, are we going to survive? The question that will replace our debate, if we see something about Syria and Turkey, is, do these people continue to be hopeless? You know, we have forgotten them for a while, and then we will again ask another stereotype question. Yes, this is an issue. In Greece, for example, we saw hardly any news or coverage of what was going on in Evros, the northern border of Greece, you know. Everybody was in Greece almost ready to go and fight, you know, a war. And then the week after, it was all over, you know.
Exactly.
I know, it's the
Christos,
contradiction of the
Okay,
commercialized media.
that's very interesting. Marie, you wanted to add?
Yeah, no, it's just I guess it's the rhythm of news and the concentration of news, which are all looking in the same direction all the time once there is a big story, because there is also the link to the clickbaits, and also the fact that most of the news organizations are owned financially by people who actually want results in clickbaits. So I think that's another big issue of the media system in general, which is not directly linked to the question of disinformation or misinformation or whatever. It's mostly like what's the economy of news in general, and why they are looking where they are looking, because of their financial system, and yeah, of what the readers are asking from them.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
if I may add something to that really quick, just want to emphasize that now, as it results from all the researches that we have presented and done, now it is a very good opportunity for mass media to gain back the trust, and in order to invest in a different kind of information model. This means that if they do that, it will strengthen and deepen our democracies, because they're a part of the democratic system of what we have learned. But if they tend to follow the same infotainment model, for example, emphasizing on how quickly China has built a hospital, but not emphasizing on the stuff that why the virus got out of hand, for example. Why we reached this point? Would we have been safer if we promote transparency? Because if you don't ask these kind of questions, then you will end up again on the same point that we started, infotainment model, and then nothing have to say. I mean, people are not going to trust it. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I think we will be wrapping up. I wish to thank all our attendees primarily who stayed with us for more than 1 hour. So that was the second webinar organized by DCN Southeast Europe Hub, and led by Nikos, and we have a cool team of great people helping us. Additional thanks go to World Learning, State Department, Digital Communication Network, supporting these initiatives and helping us. So thanks to speakers. We had a great discussion today. It's not the last one. I think we will be talking a lot about how democracies cope, how dictatorship copes, how to live after the crisis. So I'd like to thank Dr. Christos Frangonikolopoulos from Aristotle University, Mary Bohner from First Draft, and of course Nikos, my friend, and the leader of the DC and Southeast Europe Hub. So Nikos, do you want to tell anything?
Can I ask you another question? Would it be possible to access later on all this presentation and the articles? Because I was going back and forth in some other things, and I wasn't attending the whole seminar today, so I wasn't able to download all the materials that has been shared. Are you going to share them on your website or?
Yes, Ramsey, the point of DCN Hub is actually to promote collaboration as the DCN as well. So we will encourage you also to be members of DCN Southeast Europe Hub. And yes, this video will also be played again on the YouTube channel of Digital Communication Network, plus the articles that have been shared, and they are very good ones. So this is something that we would like to thank the participants, because they all shared something as a part of a contribution of the whole dialogue. It would be made available, all these articles, to the ones that they have participated through our DCN CE website. You can see it here actually. If let me just share my screen in order to have it here for you. This is our website, so you can find all these articles will be uploaded, while the Digital Communication Network YouTube will be, you could watch again the video and our presentation. But just to remind you that on Monday we have invited a doctor actually from World Learning, with whom we cooperate, to give another webinar for those of you that you're interested to go deeply and for scientific knowledge. And then we will continue, so stay updated. Franak, a big thank you as well for the moderation and being really democratic for us and not authoritarian.
Next time we will be more authoritarian for experiments.